Welcome to the Think Forward podcast, where we speak with futurists, innovators, and big thinkers. Come along with your host, Steve Fisher, and explore the future together.
Welcome back to Foundations in Foresight, a Think Forward series. I'm Steve Fisher, and today, we've reached a significant milestone in our journey together. After 98 episodes exploring super shifts, the transform model, world building, scenario planning, and practical applications, we're now taking a step back to focus on something that ties everything together, the Futures-Fluent mindset. You see, after all this time working with foresight tools and techniques, you've likely noticed something important. The most powerful element in effective futures thinking isn't just the frameworks and methods, it's the way you think about the future. It's the mindset you bring to uncertainty, change, and possibility. Today, we're diving deep into what makes someone truly futures fluent, the emotional, cognitive, and strategic qualities that allow some people to navigate change with confidence while others get overwhelmed. By the end of this episode, you'll understand the core mindset shifts that separate reactive thinking from true futures fluency, and you'll have practical guidance for cultivating these qualities in yourself and your organization. Let's dive in. What does it mean to be futures fluent? When I talk about futures fluency, I'm not referring to a prediction superpower or some mystical ability to see what hasn't happened yet. I'm talking about a specific way of perceiving, processing, and responding to change that allows you to navigate uncertainty effectively. Think of it like learning a new language. At first, everything seems foreign and difficult. You translate word by word. But with practice, you start thinking in that language. Certain patterns become intuitive. You start to recognize subtle cues and contextual meanings that weren't apparent before. Futures fluency works the same way. It's about developing an intuitive understanding of how change unfolds, how systems interact, and how to position yourself strategically in relation to emerging possibilities. Someone who's futures fluent isn't just applying foresight techniques. They've internalized a way of seeing the world that makes them naturally more adaptive, more observant, and more strategic about what lies ahead. The three dimensions of futures fluency. So what exactly makes someone futures fluent? After working with thousands of leaders, strategists, and organizations, I've observed that futures fluency consists of three interconnected dimensions: emotional, cognitive, and strategic. The emotional dimension. Let's start with the emotional dimension because, frankly, this is where many people get stuck. The future is inherently uncertain, and uncertainty triggers powerful emotional responses: anxiety, fear, even denial. These emotions are completely natural, but they can severely limit our ability to engage meaningfully with the future. Someone who's futures fluent has developed what I call uncertainty comfort, the ability to stay centered and engaged even when facing significant unknowns. They've moved beyond the need for absolute certainty before taking action. They can hold multiple possible futures in mind without becoming paralyzed by the ambiguity. This doesn't mean they're fearless or immune to anxiety. It means they've learned to recognize these emotional responses, acknowledge them, and still move forward with clear thinking. They've cultivated psychological adaptability, a resilience that allows them to adjust to changing circumstances without becoming rigid or shutting down. For example, when the pandemic hit, I watched as some leaders immediately went into crisis mode, making reactive decisions based on fear. Others fell into analysis paralysis, waiting for more certainty before acting. But the most futures-fluent leaders did something different. They acknowledged the uncertainty, recognized their emotional responses, but still engaged strategically, considering multiple time horizons, exploring diverse scenarios, and making adaptive decisions that kept options open. Developing this emotional dimension isn't about suppressing your feelings about uncertainty. It's about working with them productively. It's about cultivating a relationship with the unknown that's characterized by curiosity rather than fear. The cognitive dimension. The second dimension of futures fluency is cognitive, how you actually think about and process change. The human brain naturally seeks patterns and prefers linear thinking. We instinctively project the present forward in a straight line. But the futures-fluent mind works differently. Futures-fluent thinking is characterized by several key cognitive patterns. First, there's systems thinking, the ability to see interconnections, feedback loops, and emergent behaviors rather than just isolated events. Instead of seeing a single trend, a futures-fluent thinker recognizes how that trend influences and is influenced by multiple other factors. Second, there's temporal agility, the capacity to move fluidly between short-term and long-term thinking. A futures-fluent person doesn't get trapped in quarterly targets or distant visions. They can shift between timeframes, connecting immediate actions to longer-term possibilities. Third, there's divergent-convergent balance. the ability to explore widely and then focus strategically. Futures-fluent thinkers know when to expand their thinking, exploring multiple possibilities, and when to narrow it, making concrete decisions. They don't get lost in endless possibilities, nor do they prematurely converge on a single future. And finally, there's assumption awareness, the practice of continuously identifying and questioning the beliefs that shape how you interpret the world. Futures-fluent thinkers regularly ask themselves, what am I taking for granted here? What might I be missing? These cognitive patterns create a way of processing information that's particularly well suited to navigating complexity and change. They allow you to see emerging patterns earlier, make sense of seemingly disconnected developments, and adapt your mental models as new information emerges. The strategic dimension. The third dimension of futures fluency is strategic, how you translate futures thinking into practical action. This is where the rubber meets the road. A futures fluent person doesn't just think differently about the future, they act differently because of it. The strategic dimension includes several key capabilities. First, there's opportunity sensing, the ability to identify emerging possibilities before they become obvious. Futures-fluent people have trained themselves to notice weak signals and connect them to potential strategic advantages. Second, there's strategic flexibility, maintaining adaptable plans that can evolve as conditions change. Instead of rigid 5-year roadmaps, the futures-fluent strategist creates flexible frameworks that guide action while allowing for adaptation. Third, there's options creation, deliberately developing multiple pathways forward, rather than betting everything on a single approach. A futures-fluent strategist intentionally builds redundancy and diversity into their strategies to maintain resilience. And finally, there's continuous learning, treating strategy as an ongoing experiment rather than a fixed plan. Futures-fluent leaders view every action as a learning opportunity, constantly gathering feedback and refining their approach. Together, these strategic qualities allow futures-fluent individuals and organizations to translate their unique understanding into concrete advantages, moving from insight to action without getting stuck in either abstract theorizing or reactive firefighting. Cultivating your futures-fluent mindset. Now that we understand the dimensions of futures fluency, the question becomes, how do you develop this mindset? Like any significant capability, it requires practice, reflection, and deliberate cultivation. But there are specific approaches that can accelerate your journey. Let's start with the emotional dimension. To build your uncertainty comfort, begin by noticing your emotional responses to ambiguity and change. When you encounter uncertainty, what happens in your body? What thoughts arise? Simply observing these responses without judgment is the first step toward working with them more productively. Then, gradually expand your comfort zone through deliberate practice. Start with small uncertainties, maybe trying a new approach to a familiar task, and notice how you respond. As you build comfort, progressively engage with the larger unknowns. It's like building a muscle. You need to stress it appropriately to strengthen it. For the cognitive dimension, one of the most powerful practices is regularly surfacing and questioning your assumptions. Make it a habit to ask, what am I taking for granted here? What alternative explanations might exist? This simple practice dramatically expands your capacity to see beyond default interpretations. Another effective technique is deliberate perspective shifting. When analyzing a situation, intentionally adopt different viewpoints. How might someone from a different industry see this? How would this look 5 years from now versus 1 year? How would a Gen Z employee interpret this versus a baby boomer? These shifts help break your thinking out of familiar patterns. For the strategic dimension, focus on developing your weak signal detection abilities. Create a system for regularly scanning diverse information sources, not just in your industry, but across technology, culture, society, and other domains. Look for anomalies, surprises, or things that don't quite fit your existing models. Also, practice strategic questioning. Instead of asking, what should we do? Ask, what are we learning? Instead of, how do we solve this problem? Ask, how might we reframe this situation? These question shifts promote strategic thinking rather than tactical reactions. Perhaps most importantly, surround yourself with diverse perspectives. The futures-fluent mindset thrives on exposure to different ways of thinking. Seek out conversations with people from different backgrounds, industries, and worldviews. Their insights will help you spot your own blind spots and expand your thinking. Organizational futures fluency. While individual futures fluency is powerful, organizational futures fluency is transformative. An organization with a futures-fluent culture can adapt faster, innovate more effectively, and navigate disruption with greater resilience than competitors. Building organizational futures fluency starts with leadership. When leaders model comfort with uncertainty, curiosity about the future, and adaptive strategic thinking, it sends a powerful signal throughout the organization. This means openly discussing unknowns rather than pretending to have all the answers. It means inviting diverse perspectives rather than forcing premature consensus. And it means continuously connecting day-to-day decisions to longer-term possibilities. Next, focus on embedding futures thinking into regular processes. Make exploring emerging trends part of team meetings. Include scenario discussions in strategic planning sessions. Create space for weak signal scanning and innovation processes. When futures thinking becomes part of how work happens, rather than a special event, it naturally permeates the organizational mindset. Third, develop feedback loops that reinforce futures-fluent thinking. Recognize and reward curiosity, thoughtful questioning, and adaptive approaches. Create systems for capturing insights about change and ensuring they inform decision-making. Make it safe to challenge assumptions and explore alternative perspectives. And finally, invest in developing futures literacy throughout the organization. This doesn't mean turning everyone into a professional futurist. It means building basic futures competency, understanding trends and super shifts, recognizing signals of change, thinking systematically, and connecting future possibilities to current decisions. The advantage of futures fluency? Why does all this matter? Because in a world of accelerating change, futures fluency isn't just a nice-to-have skill, it's becoming essential for thriving. Organizations with futures-fluent cultures consistently outperform those focused exclusively on short-term metrics or rigid long-term plans. They spot emerging opportunities earlier. They adapt to disruption more effectively. They avoid wasting resources on strategies that quickly become obsolete, and they build deeper resilience that carries them through times of volatility. For individuals, futures fluency provides similar advantages. It helps you make better career decisions, anticipate skill shifts before they become urgent, and position yourself strategically for emerging opportunities. It reduces anxiety about change by giving you tools to engage with it productively, and it opens up new possibilities that others might miss entirely. The futures-fluent mindset is in many ways the ultimate meta-skill for the 21st century. It doesn't just help you navigate a changing world, it helps you shape it. Your futures-fluent practice. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with a practical reflection exercise to strengthen your futures-fluent mindset. Take a moment to think about a significant change or uncertainty you're currently facing, perhaps in your industry, your career, or your organization. Notice your immediate emotional response to this uncertainty. What feelings arise? What's your default way of thinking about it? Now, try shifting your perspective. Instead of seeing this uncertainty as something to be feared or quickly resolved, view it as a space of possibility. Ask yourself, what might emerge from this that I can't yet see? What assumptions am I making that might be limiting my view? What weak signals might be revealing early hints of where this is headed? Consider multiple timeframes. How might this look different in 6 months versus 3 years? What actions would make sense in both the short and long term? And finally, reflect on your options. What multiple pathways could you pursue simultaneously? How might you create a more adaptive approach that allows for learning and adjustment as things unfold? Simply practicing this kind of reflection regularly can dramatically strengthen your futures-fluent mindset. It's not about getting the future right. It's about engaging with it in a way that expands your options and capabilities rather than limiting them. Conclusion. We've covered a lot of ground today, exploring the emotional, cognitive, and strategic dimensions of the futures-fluent mindset. We've discussed practical approaches for cultivating this mindset in yourself and your organization, and we've reflected on the strategic advantages it provides in a world of accelerating change. As we approach our final episode in this series, I hope you're beginning to see how all the frameworks, tools, and methods we've explored connect to this fundamental way of perceiving and engaging with the future. The futures-fluent mindset isn't just about what you know, it's about how you think, feel, and act in relation to what's emerging. In our final episode, we'll bring everything together, reflecting on the entire journey from foundations to future-ready leadership. We'll discuss how to continue developing your futures practice and how to apply everything you've learned to make a meaningful impact in your organization and beyond. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and as always, think forward.
Thanks for listening to the Think Forward podcast. You can find us on all the major podcast platforms and at www.thinkforwardshow.com, as well as on YouTube under Think Forward Show. See you next time.